Recently, I had the opportunity to visit the site of the shooting of some of the very first scenes of one of my favorite movies, Night of the Living Dead. If you're aware of the movie, you know that it was shot in a cemetery, the Evans City Cemetery to be exact. And now, well over 60 years from the shooting of that film, you'll be surprised to see what it looks like today. For many of us growing up in Central California in the 1970s, late night television was dominated by one man, Bob Wilkins, and his Creature Feature show. That was very true for me. I was often tasked with watching my siblings while my mom went out with friends. One particular night in late September, Creature Features was playing one of its most requested movies, Night of the Living Dead. I had never seen it before and settled down after my brothers and sister were all asleep and began to watch. The movie pulls no punches and immediately gets to the horror. During one of the first commercial breaks, I walked about the house turning on every light that I could find. Around about the farmhouse scene when the dead were walking around the field, I decided to unfold the couch bed and proceeded to one by one bring my brothers and sister into sleep in the living room while I finished the movie. It was the most terrified I had ever been up to that point, and I can just imagine what my mom thought when she came home to the five of us sleeping in front of the television in her overly lit home. And that brings me to the reason for my visit. You see, as far as I was concerned, the old farmhouse and cemetery were as much actors in this film as were the actors and actresses. That first scene of the movie set the tone for the entire film. The cemetery is forever branded into our minds because the first zombie is encountered there, and the fear that begins in the quiet place only gets more intense from that point. The location of the cemetery was purely happenstance. The production company needed a farmhouse that they could use without worrying about the movie destroying the place. One of their interns knew of a large white farmhouse in Evans City, Pennsylvania that was to be bulldozed. The owners rented the dilapidated farmhouse for $300 per month, and that location was set. Once production wrapped, the owners then bulldozed the farm in order to give themselves some more land to farm. Next, they needed a cemetery, and it just so happened that Evans City had a very old and secluded cemetery. When the filmmakers surveyed the graveyard, they found it perfect. It was quiet and rarely visited. Few people would come to interrupt the filming. Once their permission was obtained, they were good to go. The cemetery scene was filmed over a 2-day period, and it follows a brother and sister who are visiting their father's grave. They bicker as they drive toward the graveyard, and once there, they get out of the car and walk toward the grave. They park that Pontiac right here. I'm not sure about this tree. I'm not sure if that was there in the movie or not, but right here is the house in which they are parked in front of. It's actually not a house. Looks like maybe a place to have a ceremony. I think because there's a slight hill right here, they opted not to film right in this area. Instead, they went up just a little ways, and I'll show you where that is. When they come up to the parents, or the father's gravestone, this is it right here. I'll show you. So Johnny and his sister come up to this gravestone and put the floral cross down here. You can see from the screenshot of the movie, the AIR from this particular stone, and then you can see that this is the stone of the father. A little more about that Blair headstone. It marks the Blair family plot. Samuel Q. Blair was born March 12, 1836 in Madison, Pennsylvania. He is known for fighting in the battle at Gettysburg. He died on March 15, 1909 at the age of 73 from influenza and hemiplegia, which means that he probably had a stroke which paralyzed one side of his body, and when he caught the flu, it did him in. The father's headstone is that of Grace and George Cole. Grace was Samuel's daughter. You'll see a lot more trees in the movie as well. And the reason why they are no longer there is that apparently a very, very violent storm swept through Evans City, Pennsylvania, and knocked down most of the trees and, in fact, disinterred approximately 200 bodies. As a result, the landscape of the cemetery looks slightly different.
Remember, they're coming to get you, Barbara.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
Now, as you can see, the first zombie makes his appearance right at this point. This first zombie was supposed to be one of the production studio's employees, Jack Russo. They frequently used their own staff in order to save money. But another employee, Bill Hinsman, decided to take the role. He said that he modeled his zombie after Boris Karloff. Russell Streiner, also an employee, took the role of Johnny. The performances of both men were so well done that they made their relatively minor roles into iconic screen presences. Her brother runs up to help them, or help her, and she is terrified and comes up here and she is watching what is unfolding in her eyes with horror from this Nicholas Kramer's gravesite. Barbara watches in horror as the man attacks her brother. She holds on to what is now probably the most famous gravestone in history, that of Constable Nicholas Kramer. Nicholas was born in Rimbach, Germany on February 18, 1842, and was also a Civil War vet. After the war, he became the constable of Evans City for 20 years. Nicholas died at the age of 75 from pneumonia on March 18, 1917. Now, it seems to me to be a necessity to pose in horror at this historic place. So here I am in my horrified pose and my beautiful wife doing her best Judith O'Dea impression. And then Johnny falls, hits his head on this stone. Clyde Lewis Myers stone right here, hits his head on that stone and dies. Now, because of the layout of the cemetery, she should have been running down this hill toward the Pontiac. Instead, they cut to a spot deeper in the cemetery and have her run through the cemetery, fall, and then it cuts back to her being close to the Pontiac again. Now, she gets into the car and locks the doors. The zombie can't get in, so it grabs a rock and begins to smash at the window. The car belonged to Russell Steiner's mother, and she had given them permission to break that window. Hinsman hits the window again and again, but it refuses to break. Finally, the window gives way and the rock flies into the car, hitting George Romero. At this point, Barbara, with no key for the car, pulls the emergency brake and the car goes coasting down the road. It should have made a right turn here and continued down the exit road. But according to another YouTuber, the road had a sharp bend, and it does, so George Romero didn't want to risk the car going over the steep drop to the left. Instead, they moved the car upward into the cemetery and coasted it into a tree there. This was a last-minute add-in because the car had been in an accident during a break in the shooting and had a badly damaged driver's side. Romero used the tree accident to explain the damage to the car. For me, I was bummed. I had thought I found the tree that was hit by the car, only to be about a football field away from it. Well, that about wraps up the cemetery scene. I do have a few pieces of trivia to leave you with. The movie was filmed between June and December of 1967 on a budget of about $114,000, which is equivalent to about $1 million today. It earned $30 million, which is closer to $250 million in today's dollars, making it one of the most profitable independent movies ever made. But the story doesn't come up all roses. You see, the production company knew little to nothing about distribution, and as a result, they signed a bad contract with the distributor Walter Reed. This ended up with Walter Reed keeping most of the profits from the movie, and the guys made their masterpiece, earning very, very little from it. To add insult to injury, Romero's original title for the film was Night of the Flesh Eaters. Now, this title card had a copyright notice on it. However, Walter Reade didn't like the title and changed it to Night of the Living Dead. But this time when they put on the new title card, they omitted the copyright. It was a clerical error, but it resulted in the film going almost immediately into the public domain, making nobody any money. As far as the cemetery goes, well, as you saw in the film, the chapel is still there, although it almost wasn't. In 2011, it was in such poor repair that it was scheduled for demolition. Gary Striner put out the word, and fans raised the $50,000 needed to refurbish the chapel. In 2014, work was completed, and the grand opening was attended by none other than George Romero himself. If you find yourself in Western Pennsylvania, then by all means, stop by the cemetery and visit it. And then go into town and take a look at the Night of the Living Dead Museum that they have there. Well, that about does it for us today. And thank you for listening to another Tale from the Swamp.